Everyone knows Noah, the ark, the animals, the flood. But have you ever wondered what happened when the waters receded? How did they survive in a completely empty world, silent, with not a single living soul outside the ark? What happened next is one of the most mysterious and least told stories in the entire Bible. Between heaven and earth. When the waters receded, the silence was absolute. For the first time in a long while, it was no longer raining. No thunder could be heard, nor the pounding of water against the hull of the ark. Only the gentle creak of wood rocking over a boundless ocean. Noah awoke without alarm, but with the weight of uncertainty upon his shoulders. Had it truly ended? Where were they? How much land still existed beneath all that water? The flood had lasted 40 days and 40 nights, but the world did not dry in 40 days. Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives were still inside the ark. Along with them, hundreds of animals, birds, reptiles, and beasts of every kind. All alive, all waiting, all prisoners. Of a miracle. Genesis 8 summarizes this in just a few lines. But those who read it with an open heart understand something chilling. The waters covered the whole earth for almost an entire year. It wasn't just a storm. It was a global reconfiguration, a total purification. The highest mountains had been swallowed by the waves. Humanity had been reset. But what was that moment like? What does it feel like to wake up in a world that has been erased? The ark drifted aimlessly over an endless surface. There was no visible sun, no stars to guide them, only gray clouds and silence. The days were long, indistinguishable from one another. The nights dark and cold. And in that wooden confinement, Noah did the only thing he could: trust. Months passed. The Bible says that God remembered Noah, not because he had forgotten him, but because it was time to act. Then a wind blew over the earth, and the waters began to recede. Imagine that moment. You are trapped inside a massive wooden vessel, floating upon a sea with no horizon, no land in sight. But one day, the waters start to go down, slowly, first a few inches, then several feet, until something creaks beneath the ark's hull. It was a mountain. The ark had stopped. Noah didn't know where. He didn't rush to open the door or climb out. He waited, watched, listened. Only when he was certain did he make a test. He released a raven. The raven flew, but didn't return. Perhaps it found something. Perhaps it was lost. Perhaps it died. Days later, Noah released a dove. The dove flew and returned. It had found no place to rest. The waters still ruled the land. He waited 7 more days, then released the dove again. And this time, it came back with an olive leaf in its beak. In that instant, in that tiny leaf, Noah understood that life had begun anew. That the earth, slowly, was awakening from its catastrophe. Can you imagine what that meant? A single leaf becoming a sign of hope. Today, we take trees for granted. But for Noah, seeing a single leaf was more precious than gold. It was a message. None of this was in vain. The world is not dead. Noah waited even longer, patient, steadfast. Only on the 601st day, after the beginning of the flood, did he remove the ark's covering and see that the ground was dry. But still, he did not descend. Only when God commanded him did he step out, and when his feet touched solid ground. The world was no longer the same. The cities had vanished. There were no traces of towers, houses, or roads. The bones of those who once lived likely lay beneath layers of mud, now turned into new valleys. The air was pure, yet heavy. The soil damp and unstable. There were no other humans. No voices, no markets, no music. He was the first man walking the earth for the second time. Think about that. Noah was an old man. He had spent a lifetime building an ark that no one understood. He had been mocked, scorned. Then he survived the greatest cataclysm in human history. Now, at over 600 years old, he had to start over. But where do you begin when nothing remains? Noah knew the answer. The first thing he did was build an altar. Not a shelter, not a hut, not a well. An altar. He stacked stones, lit a fire, and offered a sacrifice of gratitude. Because he understood something most people forget when everything goes wrong. If you are alive, you still have a purpose. And if God gives you a second chance, your duty is to honor him. There, among those smoking stones, the second chance of humanity was born. But did mankind really change after the flood? Did we learn? Did we begin to value life more, the balance with nature, obedience to the divine? Or did we simply start building again? The same path that led to destruction? Keep watching to discover the answers that came later with Noah's sons, and the civilization that would rise from his bloodline. But in that exact moment, with the world silent and the altar burning, humanity breathed for the first time after its fall. And Noah, old and alone with his family and the animals behind him, looked up to the heavens. He didn't know if he would ever understand why he survived, and others didn't. He didn't know if he would ever see a garden like Eden again. But he knew one thing. God had spoken, and he had listened. That's how the true story of Noah begins. Not with the rain, not with the animals, but with that first step upon a new earth, empty of everything that once was, but full of promises. And you? If one day you lose everything, would you know where to begin again? The first day on the new earth. The first day on the new earth was not a celebration. It wasn't a joyful reunion with life. It was a mix of awe, grief, humility, and purpose. Imagine what they saw. A virgin land. No temples, no roads, no human voices. Only the whisper of the wind through young trees. The soil still damp. The sky clear. A ground marked by the footprints of a new beginning. The animals stepped out one by one, in pairs. Lion and lioness, stag and doe, hawk and dove. Some ran fiercely toward the forest. Others turned to look at the humans before vanishing into the bushes. Balance had to begin again. Creation, once devastated, was now in the hands of just 8 people. But how do you start a civilization from scratch? The Bible doesn't give every detail of that day, but what it does tell is enough to understand that Noah knew exactly what to do. He didn't look for food. He didn't build houses. He didn't plant wheat or dig wells. The very first thing he did was build an altar. Genesis 8:20 says, "Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and taking some of all the clean animals and clean birds, he sacrificed burnt offerings on it." Why? Because Noah knew that this new world did not belong to him. It was a gift, a second chance. And before claiming it, he had to be grateful for it. The sacrifice was not a small one. Noah gave from the few clean animals he had. Brought the ones permitted for offerings under laws that would later be revealed through Moses. But Noah already understood. He knew what pleased God, and he gave the best he had. Can you imagine that? Surviving a total cataclysm, finally setting foot on dry land, and still being willing to offer something valuable? How many of us, after a storm, would think of giving instead of asking? And then, something beautiful happened. Genesis 8:21 says, "The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, Never again will I curse the ground because of humans. God didn't need words. He didn't need another formal covenant. Just through Noah's act, through his humility and faith, God decided never again to destroy humanity in such a way. But did mankind really change? That first day was more than a step out of the ark. It was a message, and in that message there are symbols we often overlook. First, the land. Noah stepped on land without sin, but also without history. There were no monuments, no statues, no writings. It was a blank page. Literally. Every decision made on that day would echo for centuries. Second, the family. Noah wasn't alone. He was with his sons. They would become the fathers of all future nations. And from that very first day, they began dividing tasks, roles, and responsibilities. The oldest form of human social organization restarted. From zero. Third, the fear. The Book of Jubilees, an ancient Jewish text expanding on Genesis, says Noah wept on that first day. He cried for the dead, for lost friends, for the world before. Because yes, he survived, but he had also lost everything. And isn't that something we all experience at some point? We survive a brutal change, but feel like we've lost more than we've gained. Fourth, the judgment. On that first day, Noah had a deep certainty. God is just, but he is also merciful. He didn't destroy everything for pleasure, but out of necessity. And still, he offered hope. He gave a new beginning. And what else happened that day? Ancient texts like the Targum and the Book of Enoch recount that Noah taught his sons how to record days, months, and seasons. He began counting time again, because he knew that if humanity wanted to live in harmony, it had to respect divine order also. According to the Book of Jubilees, Noah taught his children the basic laws about respecting blood, marriage, and animals. A minimal ethical code that, centuries later, would become known as the 7 Laws of Noah. Nothing on that day was random. It was a sacred day, a day of covenant. And that covenant was marked not just on the altar, but in the hearts of those who witnessed it. Have you ever thought that you might have your own first day? A moment in your life when everything changed, when you lost something, when the world became unrecognizable, and yet you survived? Maybe it happened after a tragedy, a separation, a loss, a fall. And on that first day, just like Noah, there are only 2 choices: complain or give thanks. Noah chose gratitude. He chose to build an altar before building a house. He chose to look up to the heavens instead of focusing on what was lost. And God saw that the earth was marked, not just by water, but by an act of faith. That day began a new chapter in humanity. And you, what are you building your new beginning on? The rain had stopped. The ground was dry. The animals were dispersing. And humanity was beginning again. But God still had something more to say. Noah had just built an altar. The smoke from the sacrifice rose into the sky like a wordless prayer. And then something happened that would mark the rest of human history. A bow of colors appeared in the heavens. The first rainbow. Genesis 9 states it clearly. And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I have set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth." It wasn't an optical coincidence. It wasn't merely a physical phenomenon. It was a symbol, a divine act, a visible promise between heaven and earth. God wasn't speaking only to Noah. He was speaking to all, to the animals, to the air, to time itself. It was an eternal message. But why a rainbow? He could have chosen anything else, a thunderbolt, a star, a radiant light, but he chose a bow, and not an ordinary one, but one made of light, color, and water. The Hebrew word used in the original text is keshef, which also means war bow. Did you know that? Yes, the very same term used to describe a warrior's bow. But this bow pointed toward heaven, not the earth. It was as if God hung up his weapon, as if he said, "Never again. I will not destroy them like this again." This covenant was not only with Noah, it was with all of us, with every human being who would ever be born, with every animal that would breathe, with every future generation. And the most powerful part of all is that it wasn't a conditional covenant. God didn't say, "If you behave well, I will not destroy you." He simply said, "I will never do it again," even though man's heart remains inclined toward evil. Can you grasp the depth of that mercy? God knew humanity would fail again. He knew violence, greed, and pride would return. And yet, he promised, "Never again will I erase them from the earth with water." The rainbow would be the reminder, a reminder for us, and also for him. Yes. In Genesis 9-16, God says, "When the bow is in the clouds, I will look upon it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature." It's not that God forgets, but he wanted there to be a permanent sign, something so beautiful, so unexpected, that it could never go unnoticed. Think about it. How many times have you seen a rainbow and stopped in your tracks? It's as if time stands still, as if something deep inside recognizes, without understanding why, that you're witnessing a sacred mystery. And yet, many have forgotten what it represents. The rainbow is not just beauty. It is the echo of an ancient covenant, a symbol that God does not destroy for pleasure, that even after judgment, there is always promise. That light can be born even from the darkest storm. Ancient Jewish writings also speak of this moment. The Targum of Onkelos, one of the most respected Aramaic translations of the Torah, describes the rainbow as a sign of universal peace. The Book of Jubilees says that Noah taught his children the meaning of the bow as part of a covenant to be remembered throughout all generations. And for centuries, the people of Israel honored that sign. Each time they saw it, they recited a special blessing. "Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who remembers the covenant, is faithful to his promise, and keeps his word." But do we really remember that today? Or has the rainbow become just a pretty picture? A wallpaper? A forgotten ornament? There is something deeper in this story. Something we often overlook. When Noah saw the rainbow, he understood that God wasn't only speaking about water. He was speaking about justice and grace, about discipline and love. He was telling humanity, no more global punishments. From now on, it's your choice which path to take. And so began a new spiritual era, an era of awareness where humanity, without an Eden, without a tower, without a living prophet, had to live in freedom. And with that freedom came the responsibility to remember God today. Many believe the rainbow is just a meteorological event, white light refracted through tiny droplets suspended in the air. And yes, scientifically, that's true. But isn't it a miracle that something so perfect appears only when rain and sunlight meet? The Bible was never against science. It simply goes beyond it. It gives meaning, purpose, transcendence. And you? Do you remember the last time you saw a rainbow? Did you stop to look at it? Or did you keep walking, perhaps? That bow was meant for you too. Perhaps. God still places signs in the sky for those who still have faith on earth. The world was new. The sky was at peace. The earth still damp. The animals were beginning to disperse. And in the midst of that new beginning, a family was the seed of the future God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham and Japheth. 3 men who had seen with their own eyes the total destruction. 3 witnesses of judgment. And now, protagonists of reconstruction. God did not choose them at random. Each represented a route, a different direction, a promise. And from them would come nations, peoples, cultures, all of humanity. But this story, though it seems like a new Genesis, did not begin without cracks. Because even in a newly purified world, human fragility reappeared. Noah had fulfilled his mission. He had obeyed. He had survived. He had worshipped. And now, he only wanted to live in peace. The Bible tells us that Noah planted a vineyard. Genesis 9:20 says, "And Noah began to be a tiller of the ground, and he planted a vineyard." What seems like a simple action was a symbolic act. Cultivating a vineyard is not a gesture of survival. It is a gesture of permanence. It means, I am planting roots. I am here to stay. And from the fruit of that vineyard, he made wine. One night, Noah drank too much. The righteous man, the survivor of the flood, the silent prophet, became drunk. And here the conflict begins. Ham, his son, saw him naked in his tent. Noah was unconscious, exposed, vulnerable. And Ham did more than look. He went and told his brothers with ease, with mockery, with disrespect. Shem and Japheth, on the other hand, took a garment, walked backward, and covered their father without looking at him. A gesture of honor, of decency, of love. When Noah awoke and found out what had happened, he did not react with physical punishment or anger, but with words that would change the course of history. He said, "Cursed be Canaan. A servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren." Genesis 9:25. Canaan was the son of Ham, and this curse wasn't a simple scolding. It was a prophecy. Many scholars believe that this scene reflects more than a family mistake. It is a reflection of what would come afterwards. The division of humanity, the tensions between nations, the cultural conflicts, the chains of pride, honor, shame, and power. And from that moment, the sons of Noah took different paths, toward different destinies. Shem. From Shem emerged a spiritual line. Abraham, the father of the Hebrew people, was descendant of Shem, and from Abraham would come Moses, the prophets, and later Jesus. Shem represents the line of promise, of divine connection, of the transmitted word. The Semitic nations, such as Israel, Syria, Assyria, Arabia, come from his lineage. And even today, the term Semitic is used to refer to that ancestral trunk. Ham was father of Canaan, Egypt, Cush, Kut. His descendants populated regions of Africa and part of the Middle East. Ironically, Canaan would become the promised land centuries later, but first it would be marked by idolatry, violence, corrupt practices. Peoples like the Canaanites, Jebusites, Amorites, Philistines, all descendants of Ham. The curse over Canaan has been badly interpreted throughout history. Some used it to justify slavery and racism, but that was a distortion of the biblical message. The curse was moral, not racial. It was not a sentence against a people, but a warning about the consequences of disrespect, of pride, of forgetting the sacred. Japheth, the least mentioned, was father of peoples that inhabited Europe and Asia. His lineage is associated with the Greeks, Medes, Scythians, Thracians, and other Indo-European peoples. Of him it is said, God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem. Genesis 9:27, which some interpret as a future union between the West and the spiritual heritage of the East. Thus, the 3 sons of Noah not only filled the earth, they filled history. And each one, with their successes and failures, would be the root of entire civilizations. But here comes the question that aches. How is it possible that after seeing the flood, the human heart divided again? The answer lies in free will. God did not destroy human freedom. He left it intact. Because true love cannot be forced out, and though the world had been cleansed by water, the human soul was still under construction. The sons of Noah built cities. They raised kingdoms. They invented languages. They marked routes. And also, they forgot. They forgot fragility. They forgot the altar. They forgot the covenant. Noah's generation was the last to hear the direct voice of God before Babel. After that, the noise of the crowds replaced the sacred silence. And humanity, in its pride, tried to reach the heavens without God. But that is another story. For now, let's go back to that first day of division. Noah, already old, watched his sons spread out, some with reverence, others with arrogance, some with gratitude, others with forgetfulness. He would build nothing more. His mission had been fulfilled. Now it was up to his sons to write the next chapter, and to us to learn, because we all, absolutely all, descend from that same family. We come from Shem, from Ham, or from Japheth. And in the end, the great question is not which lineage we come from, but what we choose to do with the new land we've been given. Most people believe Noah's story ended the moment he stepped off the ark. They picture him building a hut, planting a vineyard, and fading away with the passing years. But what if I told you that Noah lived more than 300 years after the flood? Yes, the Bible states it clearly. After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. All the days of Noah were 950 years, and then he died. Genesis 9:28, 29,950 years. Almost a millennium. A man who saw the world before and after judgment. A bridge between two ages. But what did Noah do during those 350 years? Where did he live? What did he teach? How was he remembered? These questions have fascinated scholars for centuries. Because while the Bible offers few details, ancient traditions, apocryphal texts, and archaeological findings point to a legacy that still pulses beneath the ruins of time. Let's begin with the basics. After the flood, Noah didn't found a kingdom. He didn't proclaim himself a patriarch. He didn't seek fame or power. Instead, he remained in the lands near Mount Ararat, where the ark came to rest. There, according to ancient Jewish sources, he formed a humble community centered on the principles God had revealed to him: respect for life, gratitude, justice, and purity. The Book of Jubilees, an apocryphal text revered by both Jewish and Ethiopian communities, says that Noah wrote books. Yes, he left behind writings, teachings, instructions, and warnings. He passed them on to his sons as a moral and spiritual legacy. Some believe fragments of those writings survived, that they were the foundation for later codes, including the famous 7 Laws of Noah, which Judaism considers universal commandments for all humanity. These 7 laws are simple, yet profound. 1. Do not kill. 2. Do not steal. 3. Do not worship idols. 4. Do not blaspheme. 5. Do not engage in sexual immorality. 6. Do not eat flesh with blood. 7. Establish systems of justice. Sound familiar? Even if you're not religious, these principles are the moral foundation of almost every civilization, and they trace back to Noah. But there's more. According to Armenian and Sumerian traditions, Noah was seen as a sage, almost a sacred king. His figure was adopted by many cultures, under different names. In Mesopotamia, he was Utnapishtim. In Babylonian texts, he was Ziusudra. In others, he appears as Nu, or Nuh. All of them, men who survived a flood, received divine instruction, and ushered in a new age. Coincidence? Or fragments of a single story told in different tongues? And then comes the most fascinating question. Where is Noah buried? The Bible doesn't say, but legends have tried to answer it. One of the most well-known claims that his tomb is in Nekhchivan, in present-day Azerbaijan, not far from Mount Ararat. There still stands a mausoleum known as Noah's tomb, protected and revered for centuries. Other texts point to Karakukis in Turkey, or even to Karak in Lebanon, where some Maronite Christians believe his remains lie. Could his body still rest underground, waiting to be discovered? Or was he buried in a secret place like Moses to prevent his tomb from becoming an idol? We may never know. But here's what we do know. His legacy is not buried, it's alive. In words, in values. In human conscience, Noah was not just a builder. He was a preserver of the human soul. He lived to teach us that God can judge with severity, but also restore with tenderness, that even after the most brutal collapse, life continues. If life is honored, today, the name Noah lives on in the three great monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In the Quran, his story takes up an entire surah, where he is honored as one of the 5 great prophets. For Muslims, Noah is a symbol of patience, of faith in the face of mockery, and of complete submission to God's will. Do you realize what this means? 3 religions, representing over half of the world's population, revere Noah. And yet the modern world has reduced him to a children's cartoon character. A man in a robe with a boat full of animals. But Noah was much more. He was the last righteous man before judgment, and the first righteous man after judgment. The last man of the old earth, and the first patriarch of the new one. In a world that often forgets its roots, Noah remains a silent reminder, not because he was perfect. He made mistakes, like when he became drunk. But even in his failure, he held on to his faith. Maybe that's why God chose him. Not an angel, not a scholar, but an ordinary man, obedient and faithful. And his legacy still breathes. In every moral code, in every nation that seeks justice, in every rainbow that appears after the storm. We may never find his tomb. His books may have been lost in the mud of time, but his story lives on in each of us who dares to start again. For centuries, Noah's story was told as a warning from the past, a distant tale, a legend from ancient times. But today, thousands of years later, its echo is louder than ever. Because what if the flood wasn't just water? What if the true message wasn't punishment, but opportunity? What if we're living through it all over again, without even realizing it? Look around you. The earth is shaking. The poles are melting. The seas are rising. The rains are intensifying. Fires are devouring forests. Cities are flooding. Fields are drying. Species are vanishing. And in the midst of it all, humanity keeps moving forward as if nothing is happening. Building towers. Expanding borders. Competing for power. Ignoring the call. Ignoring the warning. Doesn't it sound familiar? In Noah's days, people lived as if everything was fine. They ate, they drank, they got married. But violence had multiplied. Greed had poisoned everything, and the human heart had completely turned away from the Creator. The Bible says in Genesis 6-5, "The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time." Is it really that different today? Today, violence doesn't always show in swords. It shows in indifference, in social injustice, in digital hatred, in contempt for one another. But today's flood isn't made of water. It's made of anxiety. of crises, of hopelessness, of misinformation, of emptiness. And yet, there are still Noahs, people who hear an inner voice, people building an invisible ark, not of wood, but of faith, of love, of purpose, of truth, because today, the ark is not a physical refuge. It is a spiritual decision. Each one of us has the chance to build ours, to prepare, to protect our soul, to create a space where hope can live while everything outside seems to collapse. Are you building yours? Or are you laughing like they laughed at Noah? Do you mock those who speak of the soul, purpose, and forgiveness? Or are you too busy to even look up at the sky? Jesus warned clearly in Matthew 24:37-39, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away." What if we are living those days right now? What if the real difference isn't what's happening outside, but what you're doing with it? Because yes, the world is shaking, but it's also awakening. Millions of people are searching for answers, returning to the origin, rediscovering spirituality, asking why they are here. These people aren't perfect. They don't have all the answers, but they've started to hear that voice. The same voice that once told Noah, "Build the ark, even if everyone laughs." Maybe you are one of those people. Maybe you're tired of the noise. Maybe you felt like everything is falling apart. Maybe you've lived through your own flood, a loss, an illness, a breakup, a void dot, and without even realizing it, you've started to build. You've started to pray. You've started to forgive. You've started to seek. You've started to listen more and shout less. You've started to say, "I don't want to live the same way anymore." That is the beginning of your ark. Noah wasn't perfect. He wasn't popular. He wasn't understood. He was just obedient. And that was enough to save the world. God didn't ask Noah to save everyone. He asked him to do his part. And his part was enough. Today, you don't need a wooden boat. You just need a willing heart. And when your own storm comes, when everything you've built begins to shake, when you feel like there's no way out, remember this: the flood is not the end. It's the beginning of a new chapter. And after the water comes the sky. And in the sky, the rainbow, the promise, the eternal symbol that God never abandons those who seek him. Today, more than ever, the world needs Noahs. People willing to build even if no one understands, to believe even if no one sees, to sow faith in the midst of doubt. You're not here by accident. If this story touched something inside you, maybe it's time to start building your own ark. From the inside out, here, between heaven and earth, we share messages that don't just tell stories, they awaken souls. Subscribe, activate the bell, and join us each week as we uncover the truths the world has forgotten, but heaven still remembers.